Welcome back to Vitals and Voices, where we navigate the complexities of the American healthcare system, one story, one solution, one voice at a time. I'm your host, Dr. Felucia Ogunfiditimi, and today's topic is a solo commentary around the recent nurse strikes that we've seen around the country and the impact of unionization. Is unionization the future of healthcare work? So let's lay the foundation around this. Over the past few weeks, tens of thousands of nurses in New York and California have stepped off the job. And these aren't isolated protests. They are large scale coordinated labor actions at some of the most prominent healthcare systems in the country. So today on Vitals and Voices, I want to ask a question that healthcare leaders, clinicians, and policymakers can no longer avoid. Is unionization beneficial for healthcare workers, or is it a symptom of a deeper system failure? Let's set the background around this and discuss what's happening right now. In New York City recently, roughly 15,000 nurses represented by New York State Nurses Association walked off the job at major institutions, including Mount Sinai and Montefiore. Similarly, in California and Hawaii, more than 31,000 nurses and healthcare workers at Kaiser Permanente launched another strike after months and months of stalled negotiations. Across both of these states, the demands sound familiar. The request is for safe staffing ratios, wages that keep pace with inflation, retention, burnout mitigation, and workplace safety. And this matters because strikes of this scale don't happen when health systems are healthy. They happen when workers feel unheard. So what's the big picture? What does the data say about unionization? If we move past the ideology and just look purely at the evidence, nurses already have one of the highest unionization rates in healthcare, roughly 17 to 18% nationwide. And that continues to grow. Research consistently shows that unionized nurses earn higher average wages, often cited between 8 to 20% more than their non-union peers. They often have stronger benefit packages, including health insurance and retirement plans. And they even report higher job satisfaction in some studies and lower turnover. However, and this is critical, this is important, the data on patient outcomes is mixed. Some studies show improvements tied to patient advocacy and staffing advocacy. However, others show neutral impact. So unionization isn't a silver bullet. It's not a panacea. It's a lever. So let's ask a series of questions around this. Why are nurses turning to unions now? I believe it's because traditional internal mechanisms have failed. Hospitals have been asking nurses to absorb chronic understaffing, rising patient acuity, administrative burdens, and moral injury from delivering care in strained environments. Unionization becomes more attractive when individual advocacy no longer moves leadership, or when workforce concerns are consistently framed as quote unquote budget problems instead of patient safety issues. Question number 2. Do unions actually improve working conditions? Once again, sometimes they do, often, but not automatic. Unions are most effective when they focus on enforceable staffing language, transparent workload expectations, retention incentives, but not just wage increases. Where unions struggle is when negotiations become purely adversarial or when financial realities are ignored. Unionization does improve leverage. I think we can all agree on that. But leadership quality still determines outcomes. Once again, leadership quality still determines outcomes. Another question that we should ask, what are the downsides, especially for patients? Yes, let's make sure that this is focused on patients because strikes are disruptive, period. Hospitals often rely on expensive temporary staff, which tends to strain finances and can disrupt continuity of care. Workers lose income during walkouts, and more importantly, communities may experience anxiety when care delivery is publicly at risk. But here's the uncomfortable truth. If patient safety can only be maintained by suppressing worker voices, then the system is already broken. And then the final question is unionization the future for all healthcare professionals? I mean, their demands are not isolated to nursing. And I want to say not necessarily, but the collective voice is. For some professionals, unions may be the right tool. For others, like physicians, PAs, nurse practitioners, alternative models, shared governance, clinical councils, we've talked about executive APP roles, transparent staff and analytics may achieve the same goals without formal labor action. The lessons from New York and California isn't that everyone should unionize. The lesson is that healthcare workers are done being silent. So what are the leadership takeaways around this? One, strikes are not a failure of labor. They're a failure of leadership alignment. When organizations listen early, before burnout occurs or becomes a crisis, unionization becomes optional, not inevitable. Healthcare leaders should ask themselves, do our frontline workers believe we hear them? Do we act before morale collapses or after headlines appear? Because the cost of ignoring workforce signals is always higher than the cost of addressing them. So in closing, I don't think unionization is the enemy of healthcare. I think burnout, silence, and disengagement are the enemies of healthcare. So the real question isn't whether unions are good or bad. It's whether healthcare organizations are willing to evolve before workers are forced to organize. I've extended an invitation to a few nurse executives to come onto this show and help us shed some light on this critical topic, because I don't believe this conversation is going away. So until next time, this has been another episode of Vitals and Voices. I'm your host, Dr. Felucia Ogunfiditimi, asking you to stay engaged, stay inspired, and always use your voice. Thank you, and we'll continue this conversation.